collecting evidence about what is happening on the ground, building the knowledge base, the data, because part of our doing something about gender equality and women's empowerment is understanding what is happening at present. So we collect data, we get others to collect data, and to have an analysis in the different areas of gender equality and women's empowerment as to where things stand in the different countries. We also, so that is called the knowledge hub function. The other very important work that we do is intergovernmental norm setting, standard setting on gender equality and women's empowerment. We support the strengthening of such norms on gender equality and women's empowerment so that countries around the world who commit to these international standards then have to translate them into national laws and policies and measures. And then we also work in over 74 countries on the ground to support governments, to support civil society and women's organizations to do their part in terms of gender equality and women's empowerment policies, and making sure that those policies are reflected in all sectors. Because it's not enough to have a gender ministry or a women's affairs ministry and that to be a boutique kind of an enterprise in the government or in society. It has to be, we call it mainstreaming, but that's too bureaucratic a word. What we really mean is we want to embed, we want to prioritize gender equality and women's empowerment in every sector of state public policy and state activity, but also in terms of civil society, engendering civil society, because civil society is working in the human rights sphere generally or development sphere generally, but we want everyone to be prioritizing gender equality, women's empowerment issues in all that they do. So we are on the ground with you, and we have in terms of, and that brings me to another aspect, which is why I'm here on a Saturday afternoon in the midst of all that we have to do for the Commission on Status of Women, because we have a very privileged partnership with civil society, with the women's movement, because we are here. They have been, the women's movement has been our godmother. So all of you have been our godmothers and god-sisters, and that's how we and women got created. So we have a very special relationship and a very special responsibility vis-a-vis the civil society, and your organizations are an example of that. And I would like to pay tribute to all of you today for all that you do to advance gender equality and women's empowerment in your own spheres, in your own lives, all that you do also to spread the messages around, all that you do to empower others. The other aspect that I would like to highlight about our work is how we can advocate. Advocacy is a very important part of UN Women's message, work and mission. We have to advocate on a number of key areas, because essentially gender equality and women's empowerment is about bringing about transformation. And transformation comes about by raising awareness, by changing mindsets, removing gender stereotypes, and making sure that girls and women, boys and men are fully engaged in this enterprise and willingly come forward and commit to this enterprise. So advocacy is a very important part of our mandate. But what do we do in terms of which themes do we focus on? We are an organization which coexists with a number of other UN organizations that focus on health, the WHO, on labor, the ILO, and on education, UNESCO, children, UNICEF. So there are a number of other organizations. So how do we find a niche and how do we make them work for women? So that is the other part of our work. Coordinating and holding other UN agencies accountable on gender equality and women's empowerment related policies and performance and delivery. So that is something that we have been doing. We now have a system-wide action plan. We have all the UN entities as well as UN system entities as well as World Bank and IMF and everyone else joining this movement of delivering for women and girls through their sectoral expertise and vantage points, whether it is, as I said, health or education, HIV/AIDS. We have become the 11th co-sponsor of UN AIDS, for example. So we are, and then we are part of this maternal and child mortality coalition and H4, we call it H4++. So that's how we are mobilizing the UN system to deliver for women. Then, in addition, what we really need to make sure is that even as we deliver, we have some niches, we have some specific thematic priorities that we focus on. And these relate to economic empowerment of women, because unless you get women their property rights, their land rights in the case of rural women, their rights of inheritance, their access to essential goods and services, their ability to have an independent income, their right to equal wage for equal work, their right to leadership in economic field, and their entrepreneurship capacities, we are not going to have gender equality and women's empowerment. So that's what we help support on the ground and in terms of our policy and research and advocacy. The second major area is to make sure that women take their destinies in their own hand, but also the country's destiny, the community's destinies in their hands. That means promoting their political leadership and role in decision making in all sectors at all levels, whether it's the parliament, whether it is the cabinet, whether it is head of state, whether it is at the local council level as we are doing in India. There is already, because of a quota, there are 1.5 million women village councillors in India. It's one of the biggest instruments in grassroots democracy, and we are engendering that democracy. And we are making sure that all those 1.5 million women who are there originally, who were there, because this measure dates back to 1993, but now they have become so empowered that it's now third generation, fourth generation women councillors who are there. But we still need to train them, we still need to empower them, so that they can use that position to better deliver for their communities, for themselves, their families, and the village and the district as a whole. We had many of these women who told us, recently Madame Bachelet and I visited Jaipur, and we also then went into some of the villages. We attended a Gram Sabha with some 8,000 people who told us about their experiences and how this training that we provide and the work that we do with them, how that has helped them to get water, pipe water in their communities, or for getting schools built, or for getting better teachers. So, this is what we are trying to achieve, empowering, making sure that political leadership is seized by women, and how in turn that changes the role model, that, the perceptions of role play about women and girls. How young girls who were there, how more young girls are now going to school because they see these women village councillors sitting in leadership positions. So it has a very, very powerful demonstrative impact. So we are also advocating for quotas in Parliament, and there are over 33 countries now who have more than the critical mass of 33% of political representation in Parliament. So this is the kind of work we seek to do. We work with electoral commissions, we work with constitutional bodies, and we work at the grassroots level with women to get them interested. Many women think politics is either too dirty or too dangerous. In many countries it is dangerous. It's too dangerous, or it is not for me because I won't be able to do it. So we have to create the leaders of tomorrow, to foster the leaders of tomorrow, and we are doing that in many countries. Over 71 countries where we have programs of governance and political participation and leadership. Because unless you are part of the levers, or you are able to influence the levers of governance and power, you are not able to change anything for women and girls. So that is the other thematic priority. Yet another area where, at this CSW, as you know, the Commission on Status of Women, and I'm going to come to the Commission on Status of Women in a minute. This Commission on Status of Women focuses on ending violence against women. You know that globally, 7 out of 10 women have indicated that they suffer some kind of violence. They have suffered some kind of violence in their life. So this is a pandemic, and it is universal. It's in rich countries, poor countries, geographically diverse countries, small countries, big countries. So it's a universal phenomenon, and that's something that unites us all in trying to end this most severe violation of human rights, and one that is a manifestation of the multiple intersecting forms of discrimination and inequality. Why does violence take place? Because of perceptions of power and perceptions of vulnerability or of inferiority. So this is the kind of thing that we are also trying to fight against, and the Commission on Status of Women, which is going to take place from Monday onwards, is focusing on ending violence against women. And UN Women has very strong programs in this area, ranging from advocacy campaigns like the Secretary General's Unite to End Violence Against Women campaign, which is a global campaign, regional, national, and we also have a platform, advocacy platform called Say No to Violence campaign, which is meant to elicit actions, and every year more than 6 million actions are registered by our correspondents, those whom we engage around the world. And then we also join hands with many existing platforms, including, you mentioned about youth, and I'm very happy to see that there are so many of you here, that we work together, for example, with the World Association of Girl Guides and Boy Scouts, to have curricula that teaches them how to have respectful relationships with, among boys and girls, because that's where the nursery of respectful relationships can be built up. So we reach 10 million boys and girls through such a platform on a campaign to end violence against women and girls. So this is one. We also have a trust fund, United Nations UN Women Trust Fund to end violence against women, which makes available on a fast-track basis financial resources and sometimes programmatic collaboration to women's organizations and civil society who are working on the ground on programs and projects to end violence against women. Either they are engaged in prevention strategies and programs. What do we mean by prevention? There are 4 P's of ending violence against women: prevention, protection, provision of resources, and prosecution of perpetrators. So these are the 4. So we are providing support, and we are ourselves engaged on the ground in more than 50 countries in programs to support both financially and directly working on the ground programs to address these 4 P's of ending violence against women. We also have, of course, partnerships, specific partnerships. I already mentioned RAGS, but there are other partnerships that we work. And now, in the context of, every 25th November, do you know what day that marks? Sorry? Birthday? Exactly. So it marks the International Day to End Violence Against Women. So this year, what did we do? We have launched Madame Bachelet sent letters out to all the heads of state and government around the world, asking them and urging them to commit to end violence against women, but to announce, as part of that commitment, to announce new initiatives and measures that they commit to ahead of the Commission on Status of Women or at the Commission on Status of Women. And so far we have received commitments from 30 countries, and we also hope that at the CSW many more countries will come forward and commit. And we have a specific event there to mark this commitment. So there are many initiatives that are ongoing, but what is very important, what we want out of this Commission on Status of Women is an agreement by member states that there are a number of norms and standards. There are a number of commitments that member states have made. You know the Commission on, do you know the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women? CEDAW. So that, then you have the CEDAW committee which monitors the reporting on this, and then you have the CEDAW committee's General Recommendation 19, which focuses on ending violence against women. You have a declaration on ending violence against women, and you have many regional declarations, regional conventions, including, so I have been around in Addis and San Salvador and elsewhere. We are trying to make sure that we recall those. These are often forgotten when we are looking at these policies and measures to end violence against women. We want them to recommit to these norms and standards. We want them to bridge the gap between commitment and implementation. We want accelerated and effective implementation of those norms and standards and laws and policies. And we want that very purposive, targeted action is taken on an effective prevention strategy. And prevention we have for the first time defined in the comprehensive way that we have. And I would encourage you to go to our website and read the 2 Secretary General's reports, one on prevention and the other on provision of multi-sectoral services to victims and survivors of violence. So we want multi-sectoral services to be provided to victims and survivors, covering 24-hour hotline to health services, to including sexual and reproductive health related services, to psychosocial counseling, legal aid. In the case of rape cases, we need forensic services to be available on the spot. So, in fact, we have been also advocating one-stop center that provide all these services together. And there are many good examples. We want to bring forth those good practices and good examples and get their replication and scaling up around the world. That's what we want from the CSW and the outcome of the CSW. So we want you all to work for that, to also hold governments accountable. And also we want, one of the things that, that I come from India, and we have all been deeply anguished at this time by what has happened and what has come to light. Because many of these things happen and, they don't come to light, particularly if you are in remote areas, in rural areas, behind closed doors. But something recently happened in India in terms of this rape case of a young girl in a bus. And that has really sparked such public outrage in India and of course the rest of the world, and an awakening that we really need to get our act together as a community, as a country, as a global community. And therefore, this focus on prevention on one hand, changing the mindset through various ways, and on the other hand, also providing the kind of services that are needed at a time like this. But it's not only the government. Due diligence, governance issue, there was a Justice Verma Commission report which was prepared just 30 days after this. And it was a landmark. It has been recognized globally as a landmark and very comprehensive program on what governments should do to end violence against women. But another important thing, and this is what civil society has to also do, is to turn everything, there is often apathy. In this particular case also, there were some passers-by apparently, but nobody bothers. So what is the role of every citizen in the context of ending violence? This is something that we have to really apathy has to turn to empathy and action. And this is what you have to also try and spread in your own individual capacity, that every citizen must be awakened, every citizen must be aware and be able to act, whether in the domestic context, whether you are a neighbor. There is one campaign called Bell Bajao campaign, that is Ring the Bell campaign, which, against domestic violence. So all of this we have to do. Commission on Status of Women, I know you know the importance of this, but it is the biggest gathering of women like you, women and girls like you, of civil society. There are some 6,000 of them collected this year, record, and 2,000 delegates, ministers, policymakers, practitioners from all over the world. But we have to use the Commission to the maximum for the kind of results that I will tell you. I think I have to stop here and get some questions and interaction with you.